Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Veterinary Business Podcast, your ultimate resource for developing a successful vet practice and career. I am Narain Arulraja, the founder of the Veterinary Business Podcast and one of the co-hosts. On this podcast, you will learn from the best of the best, doctors, leaders, thought leaders, and we cover a wide range of topics, including practice management, marketing, finance, leadership, HR, AI, law, and much more. Whether you're a practicing veterinarian, a practice owner, practice manager, or a student studying to be a veterinary doctor, this podcast is tailored to help you navigate the unique business challenges and opportunities of owning a veterinary practice. Every listener of this podcast is welcome to visit veterinarybusinessinstitute.com for additional resources and tools. I have an awesome guest today, a dear friend and someone I look up to a lot, Dr. Joel Parker. Dr. Parker, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me again, Naren. Great to see you.
Yeah, same here. Let's have some fun. The topic is really near and dear to me. It's diagnosis and repair of a veterinary practice. And I love this topic because, I guess the American story is about second chances, right? America, I think, appreciates people who didn't make it from day one, who just fall and fall again, and then learn from their failures and, build on it. I think that's the American story. So, having someone who has experienced that, I didn't figure everything out on day one. I made lots of mistakes and, corrected, learned from my mistakes and then grew from it. I think this is going to be a fun episode. So, diagnosis and repair of a veterinary practice. In your experience, if you look at, let's say, 100 practices that you work with in a typical year or you have worked with in the past, how many do you think would benefit from what we're going to be talking about today, diagnosis and repair of a veterinary practice?
I would probably say a good 90%, but it's wide ranging because even if you look at the profitability, Naren, that can go from minus negative profitability all the way up to 21, 22%. And even at 22%, there's, oftentimes little staffing issues and so forth that need to be corrected. So I started using kind of looking at the profitability of a practice in my practice 20 years ago when I had it as kind of an indicator of an overall health. And if it wasn't healthy, then, kind of learn to diagnose what the problem is. And the whole concept is to look at your practice like we would look at a patient that comes into our exam room. That patient is alive and moving, hopefully. It has roughly 7 or 8 different body systems. And when you lay your hands on it, you are looking to see which systems are healthy and which systems aren't. You're coming up with a tentative diagnosis, and then you're oftentimes using lab work and x-ray work to pull KPIs, if I may, key performance indicators, out of each one of those systems to diagnose the problem. And then once you've done that, you are reusing those KPIs as you're working and repairing it to make sure that you're heading in the right direction. So the model that I've created, that I've kind of loosely called the owner independent practice management system, is based on that. It's based on really initially looking at a lot of data about a practice and seeing where is it at on the health score of things. And then from there, coming up with a tentative diagnosis is kind of like part of how a veterinarian would SOAP a patient with subjective, objective, and assessment and plan. It's coming up with that assessment and that plan to repair it or tune it up. And I just really like this because I found in myself it makes sense. And it starts putting some objectivity into a practice that's full of lots of subjective emotions. And, you can walk into a practice any given day and it can feel really busy, but half of the work being done is extra unnecessary traffic from mistakes and confusions and untrained people. So we can have in a practice, Naren, the feeling that we're busy. And then you look back at the end of the week and you go, wow, the revenue sucked. And, revenue is kind of revenue is money, but it's also an indication of your productivity. So you can have like this really busy week that you're going, oh, we're so busy. Oh, I'm getting home at 8 o'clock. And then you look at the income and it's below what it should have been. And then when you really look closely, you realize that, yeah, I spent half my time handling mistakes. Mistakes can be as simple things as getting a phone message, but the phone number's wrong.
Right.
And now you've got to become the most expensive CSR in the practice and go sort the phone number out. It could be even as something as important as a surgical mistake. One of your junior veterinarians drops a stump, or they think they do. You've got to go back in and solve that. Stump that's an expression for when you spay the dog or cat and so forth. So there's lots of little things that can represent that. And then there are other weeks where the team just gels together. It's super fun. You come out of the exam room and somebody's waiting right there for you. They've got the blood work ready to be pulled and the X-ray machine on. Like, everybody's interpreting what the next move of the next player is, and everybody's getting home at 6 o'clock, 6:15 to see have dinner with your wife and family and get your kids to bed. And you look back on the week, and it was an epic week because the systems were functioning and the KPIs are there to show it. So this approach is kind of a culmination of my 15 years as a practice owner and another 20 now running my first consulting company, Veterinary Practice Solutions, and now running my new company, Parker Business Systems, which is focusing more on this diagnosis and repair of
Yeah,
a
let's
veterinary
kind of
practice.
start with the end in mind, right? So, I work with human doctors as well as veterinary practice owners. And so typically when I look at human doctors, typically they want a few things. They want to work with a team they love. They want to do the kind of work they want to do, right? As opposed to the work they don't want to do. They want to have financial independence. So eventually, if they can retire and have dignity and not reduce their lifestyle. They want to serve the people they want to serve, as opposed to like serving anybody and everybody. So anyways, there are a few things that anybody is looking for. And then finally, work-life balance, things like that, right?
Yeah.
Like not killing yourself, working too hard. So when we talk about, I don't want to use the word broken practice, but perhaps a practice that can improve, let's start at the basics, the most important things. I know you touched on profits as a key thing, because you might be working really, really hard, but if there's not enough profits and that number is not growing, are you going the right direction? Are things
Mm.
moving in the right direction? So typically when you find a practice that is not profitable, perhaps making, barely making it or making little profit, where do you think they're going wrong? Or where do you start looking?
The first, the first fundamental thing to sort out is, what is their role in the practice? We all know in my field that they're trained veterinarians. I guess nowadays too, as owners, they could be licensed vet techs and people like that. But the other key component, Naren, that's so fascinating is that, did they ever really step up and decide to be a practice owner? So
Mm.
they've got the hat as, Dr. Jones, right? But do they have the owner hat as David Jones, the entrepreneur? And that is the single most missing factor in, I would say, almost everybody that we work with, is that they became a practice owner because they wanted to practice much better medicine. They wanted autonomy, the freedom to do their own thing, but they never really, and this is my story as well, is it took me 3, 4 years to really step up and say, hold on a second, stop the train here for a minute. I'm the owner of the business. And am I trained on how to run it? The answer was no. Didn't really know what I was doing. I was kind of just winging it. And I always smile at the movie director Woody Allen's comment that he said, 90% of success was showing up. And I think there is some truth to that. But at the same time, let's add some expertise in there. And this is where, just from my experience, personally, and with the clients I've worked over the years, there is a moment where you have to decide that, okay, I'm the practice owner. I get it. I've been absentee. It's almost around like you hired a receptionist, but they never answered the phone. You hired yourself as a practice owner when you bought the practice,
So
but you never
you're saying
showed
you're
up.
almost like an accidental practice owner, because they wanted to
Yeah,
practice the kind of medicine they wanted to
yeah.
practice, but then it comes with responsibility,
Oh,
like freedom comes with responsibility.
it
So
does.
you have the freedom, but so are you saying, is it that emotionally they didn't take the responsibility? Uh,
Yeah, they never stepped up. They never said,
they
"Hey,
were
I'm
step up.
responsible
Okay.
for this."
Right.
I when I bought my practice, I just thought, yeah, this can't be all that hard. Paydays every 2 weeks, right?
Right. Right. But there's more than just paying people every 2 weeks.
There's way more, and especially what you mentioned about your physician clients, that they want to work with a team of people they like. I think that's the next thing, is that, who have you got in
Right.
your team? Before we even start passing the puck down the ice, or the ball down the court, who have you got in your team? Are these people you like, and are they there on the same purpose? And are they there on that same over underlying purpose as you are?
It's
That's
like,
another
are
thing
you
to
are you
look at.
jumping out of bed to go to work, or you are like, oh man, I hate going here because
I
I just
know. Are
hate the
you
people
doing?
I'm going to be spending the
Yeah,
whole
on that note,
day
are you
with.
doing what I call a drive-by, where you're coming to practice, you need, to pull into the parking lot, but you don't. You drive on by. There was a guy that
Right.
used to do that. He'd drive 2 miles down the road because he hated going in. And then he'd turn around and come back. Oh, poor guy.
Yeah,
But
absolutely. So that's the second thing,
but
right?
you
Like
hit that on the nose.
yeah.
Underlying that is either a lack of or a dropped responsibility on ownership.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area to go into because it's a little bit like tuner. And if you and I bought a plane and I was never trained on it, I might like flying,
Hmm.
but how can I take responsibility for it? Right? There's a there's a whole relationship between knowledge and responsibility and your ability to control something, right?
Right.
that
Makes
that that
sense.
triangle of relationship between taking responsibility, getting trained, and then being able to positively control something. And when I use the word control, just because I know it's a little bit of a trigger word for some people, control in my mind is your ability to proactively influence something. You
Right.
know, it's kind of like driving a car. You're in control of it when you can proactively speed it up, slow it down, turn the corner, stop it, start it, all kinds of stuff. Same with the practice. And in my early years of ownership, I was out of control. That was like the tail wagging the dog versus the dog wagging the tail. It was reversed. And
So
that
you have to
comes.
start with what's important to you, right? Like, for example, who do you want to work with? What kind of
Mhm,
patients do you want to see? What kind of veterinary medicine do you want to practice?
mhm.
What's the work-life balance that you are looking for? So you engineer that into your practice as opposed to it kills you or it drains you so much.
It drains you. Yeah, and if you look at the anatomy of burnout, it's
Hmm.
people that have it's people that are experiencing continued problems that they're not solving, and those continued accumulation of disappointments. Take hiring, for example. You hired one person and they quit. You hire another one, they turn out to be stealing from you. You quit. You hire another one, they turn out to do this, that you quit. There's that's what causes burnout. When in actual fact, if you just simply take on the viewpoint that, hey, there's got to be a better way of doing that. There has to
Right.
be some technology system of hiring people that I can hire good people. If you can take that viewpoint, then you'll find it and you can solve that issue in the practice.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, if a practice is drowning, they're barely making it, they hate coming into the office, they hate, they're like, month to month surviving, doctor is working super hard. What's the first thing you would do if I just brought you into that
Yeah.
situation?
The first
Right.
thing I would do, because it's low hanging fruit, which means it's easy, to
Hmm.
do a complete restructuring of the practice and fire all the staff and rehire. Oh my gosh. Sometimes you need to do that, but that's a lot of work.
Right.
But one of the bigger, besides non-optimum staff that you don't like working with, having financial stress is probably the largest stressor in the practice. And the first thing I do on that, let's get the practice making some money. The first thing I do on that is look at the fees and get the fees into what I call the Goldilocks zone of fees for your demographic that you're in. And I developed a system on that about 15, 16 years ago, where if you compare your fees to the median disposable income of your community, then you can adjust them so that they're not too hot, not too cold. They're in the Goldilocks zone. Once you
Hmm.
do that in their end, then all of a sudden you're profitable. Like, there was a doctor that I instructed him to do a 40, and this is not uncommon, a 40% back end fee increase. And a couple weeks later, he's got an extra $20,000 in the bank account. All of a sudden it's breathing. That stress is taken away. Now you've got money to hire people. If you've got enough transactions coming in, now you've got money to hire an associate doctor and be competitive with corporate on starting salaries and stuff like that. So that's my
Mm.
first thing to look at, just because it's so common. Oh my gosh, my 20 years of consulting, once I figured that out, and it's not a perfect system, but it's pretty good, right? But and the median disposable income, just FYI, for the listeners, that's the cash in your jeans, after tax bank account balances that your clients have got. It's what they use for food, clothing, shelter, automobile expenses, and pet care. Right? So if your fees are below what the formula should be in relation to the MDI, the median disposable income of your area, then you're gonna that's one of the reasons you'll struggle. And why I call that low-hanging fruit, because it's, you know, it's a couple clicks on the computer to change it.
Right. Let me ask you this. For those naysayers who are like, oh no, I can't increase my fee 40% or even 10%. What's your experience like when you do that? Do clients walk away or it never happens?
The
Like,
ones that survive do it, and they look back and they go, all the fears. So here's some top fears. Number one,
yeah,
that the clients aren't going to come in. Doesn't happen. Number two,
okay.
the clients are going to leave. You know, the guy that raises fees 40%, you know, I had a crazy cocktail owner, like a kind of a crazy client leave. No big deal. But those fears, number two, number three, that the staff are going to get pushback from the clients. If your staff are trained on how to present patient care plans and estimates, they'll be fine. The other one is that you're not going to get good reviews on Google. Not true. So all of my experience, Duran, after 20 years of this now, is
Right,
that it is our basic fears that are like mirages that seem so real that stop us from doing it. And the
right.
veterinarians, and there are many that can just set that aside and go, like there was one guy I met that during COVID, he was about to go bankrupt. He was a young guy. He did on his own a 50%, he doubled his fees and nothing happened. This is the most remarkable thing, listeners, is that when you do 20 to 30, 40, 50% fee increase, not uncommon, there is this resounding sound of silence, of pushback. And, and you know, all I can say is that I'm here to help you get through that. Now, I used to say, let's say it was a 30% fee increase, and I used to
Yeah.
say, okay, let's do 10% a month, and then we'll get up to 30, you know? And then somebody, a client on my profit booster webinar commented that, well, Dr. Parker, they only come in every 6 months. So if so, why don't you just
Might as well do it.
why don't you just do it? And that's what I started doing. Just rip the Band-Aid off and do it. If you have to pour yourself a tall glass of wine or whatever you need to do, I'm okay
Yeah.
with that. But oh, and the other thing is that they think they need to ask their staff for permission.
Mm,
And so they'll get together with a staff meeting. They'll go, guys, you know, I've been working with Dr. Parker and he wants us to do, you know, a 30% staff increase. What do you think? And it's a little bit like Tom Clancy's book, you know, The Sum of All Fears. You know, when you put an Army man and a Navy man and an Air Force man in the same room, what do you get? You get the sum of all fears. That's exactly what happens with group fears in a staff meeting. So in my experience, the people that actually do it, and they've kind of had that kind of talk to themselves in the mirror and say, listen, I got to do this. You know, I've got to get my courage up to run this practice. Those guys that actually do that go in and quietly do that 30% fee increase and nobody says anything. Those are the people, those are the practice owners that are going to survive. I'll tell
mm,
you right now, you know this too, Naren, by running your own company. Ownership is lonely. It's not,
yeah.
you know, it's not a consensus like, hey guys, you know, like a staff meeting might be on certain things, but running a business a lot of times is making decisions. And it's a little bit like, you know, Steve Jobs when, you know, in the early 2000s, Apple was running out of money.
Yeah.
And they were in desperate need of new product launch. They had a product, you know, in the hopper, but they had no money to launch it, and they were going down. They were closing on a bankruptcy.
I think
John,
Michael Dell said, if I were Steve, I would sell the buildings and give the money to the shareholders. He literally
yeah,
said that.
he said that. I know. So what did Steve do? He contacts the arch enemy of Apple, Bill
Yeah.
Gates, and Bill Gates puts in, I forget what it was,
200
120
million
million.
dollars. 200
40, how
million.
much was it?
$200 million.
He put in, okay, 200 million. Thing. He puts in 200
Microsoft
million.
bought like 5% of Apple
I
for
know.
200 million, which is like at that time was worth $4 billion.
4 billion. So
Yeah.
he puts in $200 million. They release the iPod, 1,000 songs in your pocket, and the
Yeah.
company takes off. But
Yeah.
when Jobs went to the annual conference in Cupertino, California, he got up on stage. He says, "Guys, I've solved our problems." He puts a big picture of Bill Gates up there, and the crowd boos.
Yeah.
So I illustrate this point, and you're aware of it too, is that, leadership is not all about attracting friends. It's doing the right thing
Right thing
for the
at the right
company,
time.
and it can
Mhm.
be lonely. And you look what happened with Apple. I think they're still the largest company in the world. We would not
Yeah.
have, the iPhone without Bill Gates stepping in. Okay, long
If
story
you have,
short,
if you have, bought $1,000 worth of stock when Steve came back, it would be worth $1 million today,
$1 million.
literally,
I
like
literally, I know,
$1,000. So you bought $1 million, you'll be a billionaire today.
crazy. I know, and he had to fight with all the people that were part of the Mac club, that kind of like group, that hated Microsoft and all that
Yeah.
stuff. Anyways, the bottom line is low-hanging fruit to turn a company around is looking at fees initially, helping the owner. And again, that's where, you know, they do need some help like that. They got to be able to call you and go, hey, I'm about to push the button for a 40% fee increase. And I go push it. They need that coach. They need that
Permission. They need
wingman.
that permission because the fear is the number one thing, right?
Fear
So
is the
when you
number one.
have somebody who has helped hundreds of other practices and you have helped everyone push that button,
I
the
know.
red button,
I
the
know.
scary red button,
The
it
scary
just,
red button. You're right.
yeah.
I know. So that's the first thing. The
On the
next
other hand,
thing,
it's also the easy button, right? Like it's just such an easy
so
decision.
easy. So
Yeah.
easy. So on this Profit Booster course I put on this 2-day, webinar based Zoom course, I show people the effect of a 20% fee increase, just 20, which is so
Mhm.
common. Probably 80% of practices need it. A 20% fee increase increases the revenue by 20%.
Yeah.
But there was no extra hiring, no consumption of goods or medical supplies, no extra rent, nothing. It is absolutely pure profit on the top. And that's the
Right.
beautiful thing about it. So that's the long answer to your question there, and about what's the first thing to do. The second thing is to look at the crew of people and look for the Debbie Downers, look at for the negative ones, and have some closed door meetings one-on-one with them, about attitudes. And if it can't be solved, then work towards offboarding them and
Mm.
opening up that valuable staff real estate, of checks and CSRs and so forth, to bright new people and get some, I don't know if I told you this before, but I used to hire clients. I had a little sign on the front desk that said, hey, if you're a positive people person, in parentheses, who loves pets too, please apply. And
Mm.
so we would get these amazing, like 1 out of 20 clients, or just these ones that they come into your office, they get the whole team laughing, they chat with everybody. We hired that person. She was a retired Canadian Airlines stewardess, and she was magical. So much
Right.
fun. That's the other thing. Get the magic into the practice.
So that's the second thing. You start with money, then focus on the people
Yeah,
who
focus
make
on the
your
people.
practice.
Yeah. And I had a client in the Houston area that bought 3 veterinary practices on a corporate that closed, and they went up for auction, and she bought these things cheap, and there was one that was just really not doing well. She'd get there on a Monday morning and somebody had broken in and ripped all the copper wires out. It was just in a bad area of town. I said, let's close that down. So she shut it down, and overnight the practice started to take off again.
Because
So
other two practices started to take off because she shut this one down.
yeah, because her attention, that one wasn't sucking,
Oh,
the other one's dry. She didn't need to staff it. She didn't need to deal with all this extra nonsense,
so it's
you
kind of
know.
interesting, right? I think even when going back to the Steve Jobs story, I think when he took over, they had like 100 products or something, like a crazy number. He just took a pen and he drew 2 lines, vertical
Yeah.
and a horizontal. And he said, we're going to do 4 things. That's it. Kill
Remember,
everything else.
I think they had the
One,
Newton. Didn't they have the Newton at that
yeah, they
time?
had
That kind of
Newton, they had
handheld
like,
device. Yeah.
they had, and he's like, we're going to do high-end consumer, low-end consumer, and then like just 4 boxes. And each box, this is what we're going to do. Think, a laptop and desktop and, anyways, it's kind of
Beautiful.
funny. I think what I'm hearing you say is it's the things you stop doing that are as important as the things
Mhm.
you start doing. Getting rid of the wrong people, making those, life-sucking,
Yep.
pits, like in this case, that third practice in a bad neighborhood that's just not working out, just shutting it down. So those are like, yeah, it's brilliant. I think the way I see a coach is somebody who gives you permission to do the things you need to do, but you don't have the guts to do it.
Or the
You
gut,
know, like,
no, the courage pill,
yeah, the courage pill. And
And
you're
there's
like, yep,
a
do
lot
it.
of
It'll
stuff
work.
on courage. Yeah. The kind of
Yeah.
wingman, push the button, push the red button.
push the red button. It's just, we know it in our heart, but we just can't get ourselves to do it.
Yeah.
It's awesome, really chatting with you. Any final thoughts as we think about this situation? And I know you talked about different levels. I asked you, right off the start, like who would benefit from what we're going to be talking about? You said 90%. So what are some of the small issues that practices that are, let's say, doing, well, let's say in the top 10% of practices still could improve on?
They're still running in on repeated mistakes. Like there was one very large practice doing quite well, but at the end of a busy day, there was a red top tube with no name on it, in the centrifuge. So all of a sudden, the owner has to stay late, and the little mistakes, like they're not life threatening, no, but there's stuff like that that begin to drop our emotional tone level from being, hey, I can hardly wait to start the next day, to wanting to drive by. Right? I call it
Right.
Niran, I call it the friction in the practice. And, I coined the term the friction-free practice, where it's fun and things flow. That's what we're looking at. So it can be a little tiny stuff. It can be that staff member that shows up late again. Usually it's not the first time, but when there's repeated showing up late, it's kind of like, hey, we can't count on that person. We can't get surgery going because that person's not here yet. So they finally show up.
Right.
There's that kind of chronic underlying, like no patient died or anything like that. Like you could say, don't sweat the small stuff. But I think at the same time, if you want to look at really award-winning teams, Super Bowl winning teams, they do sweat the small stuff. And they're surrounded by people that, Naren, if you're my end receiver and I'm the quarterback, and when we agree in a place where you're going to be, where I'm going to throw the ball, I know you're going to be there. You're not going to be texting your girlfriend or your wife or your kids off on the side there and the ball goes right by you. I know, because I can count on you to be there. And if you can get that in on a team, then it's super, super fun, and it will increase the bottom line, even in practices doing 5 and 6 million. One observation on $5 or $6 million practices, Niram, is that even if they're 10% profit, a $5 million practice, that's an extra $500,000 a year. That's a lot of money.
Right.
So it's almost super important that when you're a small practice and sometimes running on fumes, that you geek out, you nerd out, and focus on the small stuff and get that profitability up. And then after it's up, like, then why not keep it in? Why not do that weekly financial plan, that weekly budgeting, and that monthly profit loss statement to track how you're doing? Why not put that in?
Thank you so much. I learned so much today, and kind of bringing it all back to full circle. Every practice owner wants to jump out of bed, go work with people they love, take care of clients they love, do the kind of medicine they want, and have the life they want, the work-life balance, and finally create financial independence. So I think everything you're talking about, you touched on money. That's the opening pitch. Like get that solved first. And
I
then
know,
you
and it's
finished with
not.
like happiness, like all the little things that annoy you and that doesn't let
Yeah.
you have this world-class, amazing practice. And so I bet there's a lot of things in between. I know we are trying to
There
summarize
are.
this
And it's
30
not that,
minutes.
Naren, you'd agree, it's not that money is the most important thing, but I forget who said it, but people that say that money is not important don't have any, right? And I believe that to be true. I ran a practice not caring about the money for 3 years, 4 years, and finally I had, wait, this is, I can't hire anybody, I can't pay myself,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. It is important. It's not the only thing, it's not the overall purpose of the practice, but it is an important thing.
I think you said it best. Financial stress is the worst kind of stress. I mean, if you look at divorces, the number one reason divorces happen is financial stress.
Yeah.
Nothing else. It's not, I don't know. That's my understanding, like of all the studies. It's just finance. So I think imagine having that stress every morning when you go into this practice.
It's
It,
tough.
it just can take the life out of you, and
Yeah.
you're not your awesome self as the practice owner, the leader
Yeah,
that
you're
everyone
supposed to
looks
go
up
into
to.
the exam room and be this awesome self-practice leader.
Yeah,
And meanwhile, 10 minutes ago in surgery, the bank manager called, this happened to me, and said, there's no money in the account. And you're like,
yeah.
oh, now you're supposed to go in with a smile on your face. You're right. It's stressful.
It's can't do it. So solve it, and I think that's a good place to start. If that's
Yeah.
obviously if you don't have that issue, then you don't need to worry about it. But if you do, then solve that. And I think your tip was so valuable. I think that tip alone is worth lots of money. Just it's just sounds so simple, but sometimes the best things in life are free or simple. So
They are simple, but as you mentioned, fears. fears, that,
Yes.
those mirages that we think are so real,
Yeah.
those barriers, those mirage-like barriers of our fears are so real. Those are things those are the demons that need to be slayed,
100%. As we bring this to a close, two questions. Any final thoughts, and how can somebody just follow you perhaps and learn more about you? I know we're going to put more information on the show notes, but anything you can leave with us today?
Yeah. First off, practice ownership is a blast if you know what you're doing, right?
Right.
And if you're stressed and you want to drive by and not go in, then there's something you just don't know how to do, or you do know how to do it, but you're not doing it. So, that's the simplicity of it. There is tools and techniques to learn how to run a great practice. If you need some of those, reach out to me. I'm just at the moment starting, my new little startup, my Parker Business Systems. And, there will be a website soon enough called parkerbusinesssystems.com, but veterinaryfinancesystems.com is already up and running, and they can reach out to me there. And I think, honestly, my email is going to be a simple thing like joel.parker@pbs2024.com. It'll be super, super simple. If anybody wants to reach out, I have clients that, text me daily, and I just, I just chat back with them. It's a fun thing. I'm at a point in my life now where, as we talked earlier before the show, I just want to work with nice people like yourself, Naren. I think we all want that.
Yeah, I
And
think at least some of us have less responsibilities, because I mean, I was the sandwich generation. My mom lived with us and she passed only last year and she was 87. So like busy taking care of kids and parents. But now I guess we are kind of being like the 20-year-old again, doing whatever we want. But we love what we do, so we just can't stop doing what we do. So
yeah,
I
and I
think
had a client. I had a client in California, text me this morning, hey, check out my cost of goods sold. Is this all that should be in there? I said, it looks great, but let's get the merchant fees in there as well. Okay, good. Simple stuff like that.
yeah.
That's what I call, again, this word that I'm going for is concierge consulting, where I'm available for people, and it just
Mm,
doesn't take much. This guy was really fun to work with because he gets stuff done.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's the key. If the person overthinks and doesn't do anything, then it's just you
Yeah,
really put
well,
those
it's
people,
hard.
unfortunately.
There
Yeah.
was another person that I was delivering. I don't know what our times like here, but just a note, there was another person that came back a second time through the Profit Booster course. And one of the things we talk about in the course is setting your management time every week. Every week. What's your management day? Wednesday morning? Okay, block it off. Go to Cornerstone, InfraRed, EasyVet, etc. Block off your morning for management time. This owner came through a second time, and they had not blocked that time off. 6 months later, they hadn't got anything implemented. So there's some
Mm,
basics like that need to get in. And those are some of the biggest challenges. And I have tools and techniques to work with that on how to shift a person's
perspective.
the perspective there. And there are reasons why they're not doing that. And I know what they are, and we have to go in and address those if we're going to get the practice to turn around. So that's
Mm,
another undercut. If the practice isn't turning around on common sense workable principles, then there is something out with who they're being as an owner.
mm. And you got to
Like,
solve that, because till you
and we got
solve
to
that,
solve that first.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's where a lot of consultants will burn out because they don't necessarily know how to do that. Right. And
Hmm.
all I can say is that if you want to leave practice or you're burnt out, I can help you with that. There's amazing tools to get you fired up, get you charged up, leave those disappointments and failures behind, like press the restart button, the reset button.
Yeah.
Then it's fun.
I really enjoyed this conversation, Dr. Parker. Thank you so much for that. I also want to take a minute to thank our listeners. We cannot do what we do without you. So if you love this podcast, please share it with your friends and on social media. And of course, don't forget to write a review for us on iTunes. Until we meet again next time, keep striving for excellence and making a positive impact in the lives of your patients and obviously pet parents. Wishing all of you an amazing week ahead.